Well, since I have special needs of some sort with Down syndrome, this doesn't define who I am.
We had no idea before his delivery that he had Down syndrome, nor did we really care. We just asked for a healthy child. To us, Brandon's a very healthy child.
And well, I decided to make good choices in life. I want to show them that I have something to do in the world.
Teresa and I, early on in his life, said that he's an open book yet to be written. And we were going to give him every opportunity. And what we learned was that there really wasn't much that he didn't embrace and he didn't attempt. And he just continues to stretch the boundaries. And now he's really doing it on his own.
I decided to make my life different. My mission is to help other people with special needs or not.
So he has 321 Life Foundation, and it really was a project that was born in high school. After he made ASB and he was homecoming king, he said, I want to help others. So that we've continued. He's helped over 450 individuals, usually from underserved or financially challenged areas, a lot of migrant students. He's gotten backpacks, he's sent them to prom, he's got yearbooks for them, he's sent them on college visits, some never be first-time college students. He did scholarships, and we continue that mission and we continue to grow that. It's not just in the Santa Cruz County area, but it's been throughout really the Bay Area and other locations. We've been to Sacramento. So he's reaching out.
I'm just going to live my life to the fullest and just move on and do whatever we want to do to make sure this world is better more than less.
In the world of Down syndrome, he's won the top 2 advocacy awards for the National Down Syndrome Society. He's also done modeling. He's shot a couple pilots in Hollywood. He's the homecoming king, ASB leadership, which really was the conduit for him to make all these other things and start his foundations. Well, I'd just say that there's not a barrier that he's faced that he hasn't been able to meet, and that the best is really ahead. And we don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm sure God has a plan for him, and we're just going to allow that plan to manifest.
So God has a good plan for me, and I just walk under His words when He says about what I do.
Would you join me in welcoming Brandon Gruber up here? Brandon, tell us a little about yourself. You're 21 years old. It looks like you're loving life. How are you able to enjoy life so much and live it to the fullest?
I'm going to just give out what I got.
Let's try it one more time. You can have mine.
Actually, I just give myself time to choose kindness, and what I do is to find out I want to do in my lifetime. As I am going to keep on doing my I always do every day.
Tell me, you said that labels are for cans, not for people. You felt like people had given you labels all your life. Why did you decide not to live by those labels, but to live as a son of the King?
Well, this kind of hard work at first. Yeah. Since I was 21 years old, I know what to do, and they put me in the label of the table. I was discard all that, and I decided to make my own life my own, that I can spread my wings to other students like yourselves. I can help others with disabled or not, and that's the part I want to help more of.
What I love about your story is you took something you're good at. In the video we saw that you do paintings, and you decided with these paintings that you would start selling them. You started a foundation, and with that you've given scholarships, you've helped send people to college campus visits, and you took something that you were good at, and you were able to help all these other people. What inspired you to help so many people?
Because God helps me when I need Him or not, it depends what I expect to do things. Then he comes down to my life, then I wanted to do something for myself. My parents helped me, and then faithfully prays for me is my grandma is with us. And I just want to bless all the people I expect to bless.
I have one last question, and that is, one of the things that we talk about a lot is not feeling good enough. And oftentimes we look out in the world, and I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not skilled enough. And because of that, we hold ourselves back and we limit ourselves. What would you say to people who are wrestling through that, feeling like, man, I'm not good enough to do this?
I didn't thought of that before since I was walking to high school. And, well, let's go back to my own first year. I was not feeling great about it. But at first, I started something to do, like sports. So I got through there to many other clubs. And they excluded me, isolated, and they labeled my Down syndrome. And I don't want it. So I decided to get rid of it and live my life to the fullest if possible. And I was your age one time. I was in that age of my dreams, wanted to come true or not. Who knows? Who might come on later or becomes very short. Or it just depends what I want to do in life and what I have to give out. More opportunities for other students.
I love that. People try to put labels on you and say, I don't want it. I'm gonna live the life that God has called me to live. I pray that sinks in your heart and that you let God define you, not other people. Brandon, would you pray for us before you leave and just a kind of a blessing and whatever's on your heart?
Sure. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for having us here today, that we can give out some kindness this year. Just bless all of us in this mission I have. Just keep on going in, and the other generation will come, and just wait until it's come. And I just want to say thank you for having me to be part of this, and wish us to have a great high school years for you guys, and me for college. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for having all of us here, and have a nice, lovely day for us, that we can have more opportunities in life and to live life to the fullest for all high schoolers. Thank you so much. And everybody says,
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Would you guys thank Brandon for coming out with us? I'm now going to give you back to Jeremy as he's going to preach the good word.
Man, you guys have no idea how that had to do with the sermon I'm about to preach right now. As a matter of fact, everybody look back to Brandon and just say, what a real one. That's how we do it around here. Okay, and so this sermon's kind of personal for me, not because anything that's in here, although it's going to be pretty juicy, but this is also going to be known as the last sermon that your boy preaches before your boy gets married. Whoa, whoa. That's kind of cool. I was thinking about that all week. Okay, and so this is like a topic that no one really talks about. A lot of times we kind of shy away from teaching about the judges because you need a lot of information to kind of know kind of what's going on, kind of know the background. I'm going to give you guys a quick skinny. Everybody here know who Moses is? Raise your hand if you know who Moses is. Okay, cool. How many of you guys seen Prince of Egypt? Okay. One of the littest movies ever. One time I played a clip from it. You guys were all looking like, bro, what? All right, so anyway, here's the deal, right? This guy named Moses is going to deliver these Israelites, and he's going to take them to the promised land, okay? They go through some tough sledding. Moses doesn't even end up going, but then the guy he mentors ends up going to the promised land, takes everybody with him, and then after that, they're in this land, right? Judges is what happens after that, okay? That's where we're at, okay? Everybody good? Okay, now, when we're there, right, there's something that a lot of people call the judge's cycle. Now, if you could put that on the screen, when they're in this promised land, you think that, because they're getting everything that God promised them, that they're now we're good to go, right? And a lot of us think, you know what, if God gave us everything that we were looking for and everything that he had for us as quick as possible, man, we'd be fine. We would never doubt all that stuff. But let's see the cycle, right? So what would happen is Israel would serve the Lord, right? They'd be like, man, God, we love you, man, it's amazing, right? But after a while, it always varied the time between they would serve and do this, but eventually what would happen is they would begin to kind of fall into what's called idolatry. That means that they started putting things or people before God, okay? And that led to also sin, right? Because whenever we put anything before God, eventually it's going to lead to sin, I promise. Okay, and so then after that, God kind of allows them to say, all right, you guys didn't keep your promise, so I'm going to let you guys do whatever you guys want, right? And so what would happen is another nation would kind of come in and just punk them, basically, and enslave them. Then after that, they'd go, God help, right? Typical, right? Don't we do that sometimes? What? Okay, and so they'd cry out to the Lord, and then the Lord would send something called a judge, or someone called a judge. Now, a judge would be like a hero, which was like an ordinary guy that they would just raise up to kind of save the day, right? Then after he saved the day, Israel would be delivered and be like, woo, right? And then they would serve the Lord again. And then it would rinse and repeat, right? So when we get to Gideon, he's not the first judge, but he comes in a time where kind of the same thing happens. Let me read the verse to you. Okay, Judges 6, 1-6, it goes, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. Now watch this. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in mountains, caves, and strongholds. Man, how mean do you have to be to make people hide in caves? All right, whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east, as I said, the Eastsiders, right? How many Eastsiders we got in here? What? All right, anyway, would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. They left Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. So mean. These enemy hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived on droves and camels, too numerous to count. So they had heads. Look to your neighbor and say, they had heads. And they stayed until the land was stripped bare, taking everything. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out for help. See what I mean? All right, and so it says, when they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites, and he said, this was what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt, and I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live. But you have not listened. Okay? And so what happens is, what's going to happen is God's telling them, man, you guys didn't keep the promise. But he doesn't tell them right now, but what ends up happening is he raises this guy up. Okay? Now, he's going to raise this guy up named Gideon that I'm going to talk about in a second. Before you guys learn about Gideon, you guys have to learn a little something that I taught a couple weeks ago, or about like a couple months ago now. It's this idea of the daily call, okay? See, because when we look at this story, we find 7 things about the daily call. Now, here's what the daily call is, okay? I made like a little timeline, or rather Jonathan made it. What? Because I can't write good. Okay, so there's this altar call, right? Everybody's familiar with what an altar call is, right? And at the service, there might be one. All right, anyway, and so what happens is, then there's the eventual call, right? Where God, you end up doing whatever God's called you to do long term, right? For some of you guys, that might mean that you guys are businessmen. For some of you guys, that might mean you guys are teachers. For some of you guys, there might be pastors, missionaries, all this good stuff, right? But in between the eventual call and the altar call is this idea of a daily call. And if you haven't noticed, for the timeline, we didn't put like an actual point on the daily call. Why? Because the daily call is different for different people, okay? You can't go from the altar call to the eventual call without answering the daily call. You guys see that? It's this idea that God tells you, okay, what he wants you to do that day, whether it's something that has to do with you and him or you and someone else, Okay? And so this could mean praying for someone. This could mean sharing Jesus. This could mean giving somebody a hug, right? This could mean, spending time with God in your word, okay? But there's this idea of this daily call. And so what we're gonna look at this guy Gideon, who's a judge, right? And so it says here in Judges 6 and 12, the angel of the Lord appeared and said, "Mighty hero, God is with you." And this is the first thing we learn about the daily call in this story. It's this idea that before God tells us what to do for him, he tells us who we are in him. You guys see that? See, a lot of times we find it hard to answer the daily call because we see ourselves differently than the way God sees us. Want to know why? Because, we look at our last mistake. God looks at his creation. See, we look at our sin. God looks at his son when he sees us. He sees Jesus, and he sees what Jesus did on the cross for us. And if you identify as a child of God, that's the first thing you need to answer the daily call, okay? So, and then sometimes we're on the other side of it, right? Sometimes what happens is we want God to use us. We see people, we look at our leaders, we look at some people insult me, we say, hey, how come you won't use me like them, right? But then we struggle with like fear and that insecurity stuff and that comparison stuff, right? And so we say, God, why won't you use me? And then God says, dude, why aren't you rooted in me? Right? But look what Gideon says as a response. See, God called him mighty hero, but look at how he responds. He says this. He says, "Sir," Gideon replied. He called God sir. Okay, who here has ever called God sir in a prayer? Not me. Okay. "If the Lord is with us, why is all this happened to us? And where are the miracles of our ancestors that are," what the heck? I think I'm missing a word. "The miracles our ancestors told us about. Didn't they say, 'The Lord brought us out of Egypt'? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." You know, I'm not going to lie to you. I remember when I first read this and I said, Gideon, that's a pretty good argument. A lot of times we ask this question, God, if you're really for us, God, if you're real in our situation, our struggle, why is all this stuff happening? Whether it's, all this stuff happening to you specifically, or why is all this stuff happening in our world, okay? But listen to God's answer. Now, the first time I read this, I was like, God, you didn't even answer the question. But watch what he says. It says, "Then the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go with strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you.'" So Gideon says, God, what's going on? If you're real, why is all this stuff happening? He says, because I sent you and you didn't do anything. He's saying, when are you, he's saying, Lord, save us. He's saying, I sent you to save them. Okay? And so, God sends us at our homes. He sends us to our schools. A lot of times we think we're with our situation. We're in our situation. How many of you guys know it's the other way around? God put us in the situation because he put our situation with us because he knows we're going to fix the problem. Right? Okay? It says, so watch the second thing. Ooh, okay. This leads me to the second thing. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to do our best. See, why? Because God is made strong in our weakness. Okay? Look what Gideon says. Gideon says this. He says, but Lord, right? How many of you guys have ever gone, but Lord? I know some of the leaders have because they've told me. Okay, and so how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe. Look at your neighbor and say, the whole tribe of Manasseh. And I am the least in my entire family. And so this leads me to a big point, and Brandon pretty much preached my sermon, and Natalia did at some point. I wish you could do that before every service. Okay, and so we often look at our background and past as a reason to not follow the daily call. We say, if they just knew what I did, right? If God just knew what I did last night right before church, he wouldn't believe in me. How many of you guys have ever heard an encouraging word, right? But then you're hearing everybody say amen, but you're in the back, right? Or you're in the front, maybe you just feel like, you're just not good enough. And so you just have the feeling that, you know what? This is a good word, but it doesn't apply to me. And so, this is because a lot of times, the reason why we can't follow the daily call, or where we struggle to follow it and we're afraid to follow it, is because we look inward for the solution. We look inward for our answers. We look at our abilities. But how many of you guys know that God wouldn't say, I'm made strong in your weakness, if you didn't have weakness? Okay? Man, we don't look inward for the daily call answers. We look upward for the daily call answers. Does that make sense? See, our answers are found in Jesus. Not in ourselves, not in what our friends can do for us, and not in our own abilities. And so look what the Lord says. The Lord says to him, I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. Now, notice how many times he said at this time, pretty much at this point in reading the passage, right? He said, I am with you like 3 times, right? And I wanted to wait till the 3rd time he said this so I can use my 4th point. God doesn't send us anywhere that he won't be. You guys see that? Man, we usually feel like whenever God gives us a daily call, man, he kind of just pushes us on our own. Like we're just donezo, right? Whoa, I almost ate it right now. The truth is that he's with you and ready to move through you, okay? You are never alone. Look at your neighbor and say, you're never alone when you answer the daily call, okay? And so Gideon says this next. He says, if you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that it is really the Lord speaking to me, okay? So sometimes God gives us a daily call that's so out of our comfort zone that we have to ask for confirmation to even make sure it's God. God, you want me to do what? You want me to go over there to that guy in the wheelchair and pray over his knee? Huh? Man, you mean to tell me you want me to go to my enemy and give him a hug for no reason? Or, man, you want me to go to the person that's hurt me and go apologize to them for being bitter? Huh? Man, how many of you guys, man, have ever felt like God was telling you something and then you had to be like, man, I got to figure out if that's God or not? But what happens here is that God gives him confirmation. Does anybody want to know? Do we have time to? Yeah, we have time. Does anybody want to know how he confirmed it? Okay, she want to know, so we're going to talk about it. So, man, imagine this, okay? So this dude's like a farmer type dude, okay? So I didn't bring this part up before. A lot of times we look at these Bible heroes and we say to ourselves, man, they must have been super buff, super tall, super fast, super strong, like all this stuff, right? But, man, Gideon was just a regular old farmer, okay? And so, man, I kind of wore this outfit because Josh made fun of me one time and said that I looked like a janitor. But that's honestly what Gideon was. He was just a little janitor, okay? Okay, and so, man, every day, man, I could just imagine that Rick Ross song, Hustlin', being played, right? Man, don't listen to that song. But you can just see in the background, he's picking that pig. He says, every day I'm hustling, every day. And he's got the plow, and he's going, every day I'm hustling, every day, right? And so what happens is God appears and says all this stuff, and he says, man, if this is you, Lord, okay, why don't you give me a sign? But his sign was such a, just such a farmer sign. He says, all right, so I got this here rag. I know he talked like that. Like, I don't even think there was a southern accent back then, but he was probably the first southerner ever. He said, man, you see here, Lord, I just want to, I want to do the daily call that you have for me, but I'm kind of unsure if it's you. So what I want to do is I want to get this rag and I'm put it on the ground, okay? And this rag is wet. By tomorrow, I want this rag to be dry, and then I want the ground to be wet. But the rag be completely dry. Next day it happened. He said, well, okay, this time what I want to happen is I want you to then soak the rag back up and make the ground dry. Next day it happens, right? And basically he goes, now he says this. It says, when Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he cried out, "O sovereign Lord." Right? And so now we get to the next part, right? We get to the next part. Now he's getting ready to go to battle. And it says, soon afterward, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east, the Eastsiders, formed an alliance against Israel and crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. So, man, it seems like the enemy's bringing everything they got. Man, they bring all the heads. They bring the whole gang, okay? They bring the Amalek folks. They got the Midianite folks. And then you don't even know how big this army is because it just says the people of the east. What does that even mean? People of the east. They just bring the homies, okay? And so it's about to go down. But look what God's response is. You guys ready for God's response? It says this. It says, then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. Whoa. That's your response to all these armies? You think that God would raise an army up? Nope, he just clothes Gideon with power. And that leads me to point 5. It says that God doesn't give us a daily call that he doesn't equip or empower us for. See, if God is calling you to do something, it means either A, he's already equipped you and you just don't know it yet, or B, one of my favorites, he's going to empower you on the spot. Okay? And so, look what happens. So Gideon, he's clothed in God's power now. He's ready to go. He's going to turn up, right? And so he's getting ready to go. He got his army together. He probably has, a little less than their squad because they got 3 armies. But they're ready to go. They have heads too. He's ready to win this battle. But then look what God says to him. He goes, the Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Whew. Man, oftentimes God gives us a daily call that's way too big for us to complete so that we can see that his hand is in it. You guys see that? See, that builds our trust in him. That builds relationship. See, God can do things for us, but sometimes he wants to empower us to be able to do it. He wants to partner with us to do it, okay? And so, a lot of times, you see, this was hard for Gideon, okay? I could imagine. They got 3 armies over there, so you think the miracle is you're gonna beat them with maybe 1 army and 1 army against 3. That's pretty good, that's pretty crazy odds, right? But then God says, nah, get rid of half of them, okay? Get rid of a lot of these guys. Why? Because he had to show Gideon, okay, that his opinion on what he thought it would take to win the battle was nothing in comparison to what God was trying to get him to do and what God is able to do in him and through him. And a lot of times, God has to break our opinion of what we think we need in order to win the battles in our life. Because the reality is, we don't need special resources sometimes. Sometimes all we need is him, okay? And so guess what ends up happening? So Gideon starts turning people away now. And he gets to the point where he only has 300 soldiers left. But how many of you guys know God can turn up with 3, let alone 300? So what ends up happening is God turns up, and the people, like 300 of them, just dog all 3 of these armies. There must have been like, who knows how many people they had? Probably like 50,000 total, and they dogged them. Look at your neighbor and say, they dogged them. Okay, so how this ends is now it's all over. The people love Gideon, right? But look what happens right here. Then the Israelites said to Gideon, be our ruler. You and your son and your grandson will be our rulers, for you have rescued us from Midian. See, how many of you guys, did you guys see what happened, right? He answered God on the farm. He was throughout his daily call. And so now God says, man, you're going to be the leader, right? The people are saying, man, you're going to be our leader. He ends up being the leader of Israel for the rest of his life, right? But this leads me to my 6th point. It says, when we continue to answer our daily calls, we are led into our eventual call. But look what Gideon says. This blows my mind right here. Okay? He says, but Gideon replied, I will not rule over you, nor my son. The Lord will rule over you. You see, even though he was the leader, right, he still put God first. But do you know where that started? It didn't start when he won the battle. It didn't start when they made him king and he was gracious for being their leader, right? It was when he was on that farm, and he answered the daily call, and he put God first in the daily call. And that leads me to my last point. If you don't put God first during the daily call, you'll never put him first during the eventual call. See, that's why we have a daily call. See, because God wants to build our relationship. See, how many of you guys know if we go to altar call to eventual call, we'll start to focus on what people say instead of what God's saying. We start to focus on more on our insecurities than, who God says we are. Then we start to compare ourselves to others. Now, can I have Lily and the worship team come up? This is an interesting situation because in this kind of sermon, a lot of us, we can see ourselves in different parts. For some of us, it's believing who God says we are. For some of us, it's, allowing God to bring us past, our insecurities, our mistakes. For some of us, it's, putting God first. For some of us, it's knowing that God's with us in the situations he sends us in. For some of us, it's all of these things. And so what I want to do now is if you guys can get in the different positions as if it's like small groups, I just want you guys to, get in your guys' small groups. If you guys don't have a small group or something, go to Pastor Scott. He'll put you in one. And so I just want us to like pray together, get together, and just kind of, ask in each prayer, pray for each other, and just love on each other. Because I feel like God has a daily call for all of you guys to answer. But I just feel like we just need to like receive like his love first. We have to receive that he calls us a mighty hero. But before we receive that he calls us a mighty hero, we have to receive the fact that he's called us a mighty son or daughter. Okay? So, I just want you guys to go ahead and head to your guys' small groups. And if you're in Dallas's group, come to my group.